All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Monday morning coffee chat. I've got my coffee all ready to go, and there you go, now you can see it. And I am here with you, coming to you from Abu Simbel in Egypt. Abu Simbel by way of my living room. And today I have with me my friend Reid Coen. Good morning, Reid.
Good morning, everybody.
So we decided to have Reid on today on Coffee Chat because over the weekend, Reid came over and we were working on some projects and trying to get organized for our next year and the year after for tours. And as a lot of you know, Reid is my business partner and we do our tours together. And the stuff that I plan with Reid is all the super exotic stuff like Egypt and Thailand and all of these really fantastic destinations. So what we thought would be kind of fun is to just talk a little bit about how we go about planning our year and how we go about organizing these trips to really super exotic places. So just to kind of like go back a little bit, Reid, just remind everybody, I think a lot of people have heard this story, but how is it that you started leading tours that were outside of Europe? Because both of us have been tour guides in Europe for more than 20 years. So what inspires you to start taking groups off the beaten path way out into exotic destinations?
Yeah, that one's actually easy, and it was my own personal travel experiences. You know, I like all of us at Rick Steves, I loved Europe. That was my first non-American travel, 40 years ago. But on my own, even before I had started working at Rick Steves Europe, I had been to Southeast Asia, to India, to Nepal, to Indonesia, and those places were so rich and fascinating and not scary that I wanted to expose at least my loyal travelers to the big, wide, beautiful, interesting, fascinating, colorful world beyond the boundaries of Europe. Europe's amazing, but after a few trips to Europe, how many more cathedrals do you need to see? How many more forts do you need to see? How many more cute hill town squares do you need to see in Tuscany? It starts to be a little bit of a repeat experience. So I wanted to broaden my travelers' travel horizons. And so we did Thailand was our first non-European destination back in 2008.
So for those of you who are watching, if you guys have questions that you'd like to ask Reid, if you're curious about how we go about doing the thing we do, please feel free to comment. I'm tracking the comments as we are watching. And hello to Miss Hoda, who is watching right now, who is one of our collaborators in Egypt.
Hi,
Hoda. So because we've been doing this stuff outside of Europe, it's been so cool to make all of these new friends in countries far and wide. So you started off with Thailand, and then you brought me with you to Thailand in 2015 or 16, and then we've been continuing on ever since. So what I thought was kind of fun is this weekend when we were working on planning our trips, what I think that is just cool is that really the way all of these trips start is that you and I just sit around and like talk about what our travel dreams are, right?
Well, that's certainly how all of my destinations began, were places that I had been and wanted to take people, or places that I wanted to see, or sometimes my clientele would sort of drive that a little bit when they would start to talk about wanting to see a specific country, and I would go to work on setting something up for them.
Yeah, and actually that's the same thing as me this year for Iceland in 2021. That was not a destination that was on my radar, but one of my favorite groups of travelers that I have as regular customers said, hey, I would really like to go to Iceland. So they brought an initial group. So we're doing Iceland because they wanted to do it. And I think that's so fun. It's so fun to have our repeat customers sort of drive what we do.
Well, it's one of those great advantages of having a small, svelte operation, right? We're not bound by big schedules, and we can respond quickly and easily to the desires and demands of our smallish clientele.
Yeah, well, and that's also been, I think, a lot of fun too, is that as we built our customer base, the customers all end up getting to know each other. And so they end up going on multiple tours with us, and then they recognize people on the next trip. Oh yeah, I remember you were on this other tour. And it ends up feeling like a big group of traveling friends more than it does a bunch of people taking a tour together. So, I mean, that's been for me the reason that I've really decided to dedicate my time to doing these tours with you, is that it's just so much fun to just feel like it's a traveling family, just like a big traveling dinner party, you know?
Absolutely. If there was a way for us to figure out how to market the quality of our travelers, I mean, of course, I think the philosophy has a lot to do with that. It attracts a certain kind of intrepid, adventurous traveler, but then they meet each other and there's a synergy there, right? Of, like you said, there's like values and like approaches, like philosophies, and there's a synergy is the perfect word. There's a synergy that develops on tours and they want to travel together again. If there was a way for us to actually portray to the broader public the quality of the people that end up on Adventures with Sarah or Imprint tours, they'd be knocking down the doors to come on board with us. So when you figure out how to market that in an effective way, you let me know.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is it's like you can't guarantee people that it's going to be magic every time, but pretty much I would say the vast majority of tours that I've been doing lately have been, you know, it seems like the quality of the groups get better and better and better, just because, you know, if they're choosing to travel specifically with me, they know my terrible sense of humor, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But also I think there's a sense that, you know, there's a level of quality that we provide, but then also a level of adventure, which is like when we were talking about when we do Israel and Egypt and Jordan again next time, we're gonna push people a little bit, and we're gonna stay at Wadi Rum, and we're gonna stay in sort of basic conditions, and maybe not everybody's down with that, but that's okay, right?
Oh, I absolutely embrace that. If people look at the website at all carefully, they'll see where I describe that there's usually at least one stop on every tour that's going to be rustic. And I mean, genuinely rustic. Floating huts in Thailand with a bathhouse at the end of the row of floating huts. Wadi Rum, sleeping in a Bedouin camp, right?
Love it.
The middle of the desert. I mean, but that's the only way you can actually get your hands dirty in those genuine experiences. And that's what drives me is connecting people to the genuine experience, not just the tourist facade that you get when everything has to be American style comfort and clean and perfect. So yeah.
Yeah, well, and actually the image behind me reminds me very much of one of those kind of times where it was sort of like, you just have to tell everybody, look, we're going to be making a trade-off here. We went to Abu Simbel, which is like a 2-hour drive, more than 2 hours, and we wanted to see the 3 hours. Yeah, and we wanted to see the light show at night, which is spectacular. But if you want to see the light show, you kind of have to stay there, because otherwise you're going to be driving back to Luxor in the middle of the night, which is stupid, and you don't want to do that. It's not smart. So we had to stay there in Abu Simbel, and there just aren't any nice hotels in Abu Simbel. Like the place we stayed at was pretty threadbare, but it had a spectacular view from the pool deck. The pool was disgusting, but the pool deck was really beautiful. So
actually, you know, that hotel, you could tell 50 years, 40 years ago, 50 years ago was kind of a luxury resort. And of course, we chose it because of location. You can walk across the street and you're there at the temples of Ramses. So and as you said, spectacular views across Lake Nasser, beautiful swimming pool. But yeah, the rooms are threadbare as a kindness.
but that's kind of one of those things that when you step outside of Europe, you have to actually start changing your expectations. You know,
Absolutely.
You can't expect everything to be, you know, the quality of the Hilton or the Sheraton, but we wouldn't want it that way either, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it does, you know, we were talking about the quality of our clientele, and this is one of those things that, quite frankly, separates the sheep from the goats, right? If people come along on one of our tours, yours or mine or our combination tours, and that's too much for them, they'll vote with their feet. They won't sign up again. And the people that do sign up again have that energy and that synergy that we're after, of an adventurous spirit, a willingness to compartmentalize, focus on the positive. When things go wrong, think of it as an adventure. That's what we want. We want that kind of intrepid traveler.
Yeah, well, and I will always laugh about how when I get your travelers that have traveled with you a million times and then they travel with me, their favorite thing to do is to recount the times things went terribly wrong. That becomes like not a bad thing, but actually something they're excited about because they can't wait to see how you're going to solve the problem.
Right. It's a badge of honor for them.
But you know, the thing is that I think maybe for a lot of people, when they start thinking about these destinations, like Egypt, for example, this is a great example of a country that probably seems scary to people. Probably seems intimidating because the only thing that most people have heard about it in the news is that, you know, there's been a terrorist attack or that it's, you know, there's civil unrest. But then when you get there and you're on the ground, it's sort of hard to remember why it is that people thought that going to Egypt wasn't a good idea, you know?
Right.
And I mean, that seems to be, I don't know how we help people to get past their impressions of a place about its safety or its travelability. I mean, how have you dealt with that in the past, encouraging people to go on trips to places that maybe in the media they see that it's not, you know, a smart place to travel, but actually is fine? How do you get people past that?
Well, all you can do is talk rationality and try to define the difference between fear and risk. Those are two different things, right? Fear is an emotion, risk is something that can be rationally evaluated. And when they see stuff on the news that makes them fearful, all you can do is talk to them about percentages and likelihoods and also to hold up the mirror of what they risk every single day. I'm very fond of saying you are probably 100 times more likely to die every time you get behind the wheel of a car and drive on an interstate in the United States than you are to be caught in a terrorist attack in Egypt. And actually that number is probably thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of times more likely, right? Because the likelihood, the risk of being involved in a terrorist attack or activity of any sort is so infinitesimally small as to be negligible, even in a country where that is something that crops up every now and again, right? So you just, and that's all you can do is encourage people to assess risk rather than to respond to fear. And I've had some levels of success with that, but there's some people that just can't do that. And that's okay. And those people should not go to a place that's scary for them. They do need to be comfortable. The other thing is personal trust. I mean, I think people who might really be on the fence about going to Egypt, when they get to know you, you know, through your social media, or if they've been on a tour with you before, let's say they've been to Sicily with you, they know you, they trust you, they will stretch themselves, they'll push the envelope a little bit because of that bond of trust that's personal. Same with me and my clientele. My first round in Egypt back in 2016, that was pretty close after the Arab Spring of 2011. As a matter of fact, we were going to go to Egypt in 2012, canceled that, and several of them kept every year saying, when are we going to go? When are we going to go? We finally went in 2016, but there were a number of people that just couldn't overcome their fear of what might happen while they were in Egypt. And then, like you said, then you get there and, well, first it's a little bit alarming, of course, when there's armed guards everywhere, because we're used to being fearful when we see guns, until you adjust to the idea that every gun that you see is there to protect you and no other reason. And when your armed guard with his sidearm gets on the bus with your group to escort you to the nearest site, and then you get to the site and there's guards there with automatic weapons and blast shields and paperwork that's being super carefully scrutinized to make sure everything's on the up. Once you get used to not responding emotionally to that experience, you start to relax and go, wow, they're expending huge resources to make sure that I'm safe while I'm here. So
we actually loved our armed guards. Our armed guards were they ended up being sort of like a part of the family. We got to know their names. They'd chat with us. They were hysterical. One of the days they were the guards were sitting in a car outside of the restaurant that we were eating at, and so we went and we got our leftovers. And we took our leftovers out to them and they were really grateful. I mean, they ended up being kind of a funny extra part of the group. One of them came in and ate dinner with us. The other one stayed outside and we brought him food. I don't know. It was one of those things that seemed weird. But then the other thing that was hilarious is that they were so, I think they were kind of bored. And so they just wanted to do something to like make our experience better. So they would stop traffic for us, which was hilarious. They'd like rush, put on their sirens and get in front of us and then stop traffic. And it was just really, it ended up being kind of a funny feature of the tour. I mean, it was something that at first felt intimidating, but once you kind of got down with it and it was okay. Yeah, they were really cool.
Actually, I've got a really good story too, from next door Jordan, way back in 2016, when we went to the city of Petra, right? The ancient city of Petra. When you leave Petra, there's a place that you can drive up just on the main highway that you look down over the whole valley of Petra. It's a nice photo stop. And we got off to take our photos there, and it was a quite windy day. And one of my travelers' hat blew off, and by the way, there's a parking lot and a little wall, and then a very, very steep slope that goes down several hundred yards. His hat blew off and blew all the way down to the bottom. And we were all like, well, I hope that hat wasn't too important to you. And our security guide in his suit and dress shoes jumped over the wall, climbed all the way down and retrieved the hat, and climbed all the way back up, huffing and puffing. By the time he got back, my whole group was cheering, and the guy who got the hat back, gave him a nice tip. And it was just one of those heartwarming, serendipitous travel experiences. And it was, like you said, these guards who take their jobs seriously, but are genuinely interested that we're safe and that we're going to have a good time. So
yeah, which I thought was really fun, that they actually actively wanted to participate in the group. They wanted to be helpful. They wanted to make sure, like I usually do the sweep, like when we were leaving the Sphinx, I usually walk around and do the sweep, make sure we've got everybody and I see everybody walking out the door. But the guards would be like, kind of being my wingman. They'd go and they'd sweep one way, I'd sweep the other. And it was kind of fun. It was like having an extra pair of hands on the tour. So yeah, it's kind of a funny thing. You think it's going to be something that'll weird people out, that'll make things uncomfortable, but actually they were super fun and they were nice to have along on the group. So I have a question here. I'm ready for Egypt. When do you go next? So Reid and I just figured that out this weekend. And what did we say? October, is it?
Yeah, I don't remember the dates exactly, but yeah, I do. October 13th. You can pencil that in. Please don't put it in ink yet. 2022 for Sarah. I've got a group going with Trish Feaster in February of 2022. So we're 14 months out and a year and a half out from the next 2 rounds of Egypt.
So that leads me to I want to talk a little bit about how we plan our tours, but it might be fun just to tell people what we're thinking about, because Reid and I just sat down and we kind of opened up our minds to what would be fun to do for 2022. 2021, we've got Morocco, which I think we still have room on the fall tour, and we have Iceland. So those are 2 things if you guys want to travel to Iceland or Morocco. That's a year from now, less than a year from now. But then 2022 is when we do some really super cool things. So do you want to talk a little bit about the super cool things we're going to do?
Sure. The things that you and I are doing together, we're going to offer Morocco again because it's such it's a hot destination right now, no pun intended. It's a warm country, but people want to go there, and we've got a great tour that we've refined over several departures now, and so that will be on offer again. Peru, this will be a first time for Sarah doing Peru. I did 3 groups to Peru in 2018 to lay the groundwork there, and it's another one of those just fantastic countries. There's far more there than just Machu Picchu. Of course, Machu Picchu is the highlight. It's the most significant moment on the tour, and it's really a dramatic entry. When you first see Machu Picchu, you have that classic view that you've seen 1,000 pictures of in your lifetime. That's the first moment. It's an overview. It's spectacular. But we also spend 3 days in the Amazon basin. Cusco is super charming. Anyway, so Peru is on the schedule. And Thailand will be repeated in 2022, early in 2022. And Sarah has a vision for a kind of the rest of Southeast Asia. We've done Vietnam, we've done Thailand, but Sarah and our ACE local talent in there in Southeast Asia want to cobble together a little smattering of Laos and Cambodia beyond Angkor Wat, and a third country that I'm super excited about, which is Myanmar. I took a group to Myanmar in 2015, a small group, and Myanmar is one of those really jaw-dropping, sort of amazing countries. So there's going to be Thailand, and then a trifecta of Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar. That's on the drawing board. We're developing that right now, but that's going to be in January, February of 2022. And then India, another country like Myanmar that I'm really passionate about. India, and you know, we started out today talking about these exotic destinations, but I have to be honest, when you were talking about, when you named the countries that you named 15 minutes ago, I thought, not really exotic. I mean, I realize if you've only ever traveled to Europe, those places seem exotic. I don't want to sound condescending, but India is exotic. Okay, that's when you're getting into true exotic territory. And before I say more about India, let me just say this. People ask me all the time, and I may have said this last time I was on, Sarah. I apologize if I'm repeating, but it's such a telling anecdote. People ask me all the time, what's your favorite country? And if I don't want to explain myself, I just say Thailand, because it's got everything and it's easy and people are friendly and it's safe, and you know, it's just easy. But I always say, if you want to rephrase the question to this, what is the country you have visited that you would least be willing to have missed? Which is different. The answer by orders of magnitude is India. And the reason I say it all that way is that India has a downside, right? India, there's poverty, there's open sewers, there's beggars everywhere. The hassle factor is very high. The sacred cows really do wander around in the streets doing their business, right? I mean, so everywhere you walk, there's landmines, and streets themselves are not, the traffic on the streets is just one of the many uses of the streets. You see absolutely anything, any human endeavor possible happening out on the streets all at the same time. It's a collage of sensory overload. And there are those negative things, piles of garbage everywhere. You know, the standards of cleanliness are completely different, of hygiene, right? So you have to be able to compartmentalize for that. And I hope I'm not scaring any of your people away, because the upside is off the charts. I struggle to try to articulate how amazing India is in terms of its variety of architecture, temples, forts, palaces, religions, right? You'll come across 5, 6 examples of different religions while you're there. You know, Hinduism, of course, Islam, of course, but Jainism, Sikhism, some, you know, Christians, right? There's this tremendous tapestry of amazing in India that, if you can compartmentalize, close it, turn a blind eye to the negative excesses, the upside is off the charts. So when I say India is exotic, that's what I'm talking about. Exotic, positive experiences, but also some challenges for Western travelers. So we got India on the books. I'm taking a group to India this fall of 2021. Sarah's going to follow behind in the fall of 2022, and we are scheduling that tour to begin at the end of October so that it coincides with the Pushkar Camel Fair. Pushkar Camel Fair is just one of those, it's the mother of all desert celebrations. I think my blog about that got published on the Guide Collective recently. If you want to go to the end, read about Pushkar Camel Fair. Anyway, we're scheduling to include that, and that's sort of India. After all my superlatives about India, Pushkar Fair is India on steroids. Okay, so amazing experience. So we've got India coming up, And have I missed anything that you and I talked about, Sarah?
No, I think that's all that we've got talked about. And then in the future, I do want to do like South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia. So that's probably 2023 that we'll push that off to. But yeah, that's enough to keep me busy in 2022, I think.
Right. And for imprint tours, just to let people know what we're doing, China will get back on the schedule in 2022. Southern Africa, that Sarah just mentioned, is on the calendar for 2021. I lost my train of thought there. China. Oh, and China, I'm really, really excited about introducing a secondary China tour. I mean, because when people go to China, there's a classic tourist route, right? You know, Beijing, Great Wall, Xi'an, Terracotta Warriors, Chengdu, pandas, I can't say it right, Guilin, right, with the karst landscapes. A couple other cities, Hong Kong, Shanghai, maybe Yangtze River cruise. That's what everybody does when they go to China, pretty much everybody. But believe me, I did some exploring in China when I was there in 2017. The things that you don't know about in China will absolutely blow you away. So I want to do I'm calling it China OBT, China Off the Beaten Track, that will be on the calendar sometime in 2022. Oh, and Japan, Japan was one of those places that personally I didn't have a lot of interest in going there, but a huge groundswell of enthusiasm coming from my clientele to add Japan as a destination. So Japan, China Off the Beaten Track as new destinations, a repeat of our China tour that we did back in 2017. And then a lot of the old favorites, Vietnam, Thailand. We don't need to go through the whole list. Lots of fun, cool, exotic destinations coming down the pike.
Well, in Japan, I'll bet you that I'll probably follow on Japan with you, just because I've had a lot of people ask me the same thing if I'll ever do Japan. So that should be something that I will take on in 2023. So, but the point is actually, if you guys that are watching, please do comment and tell us places you'd like us to go, because we do kind of work by request. I mean, and that gets me to sort of a question of, so you have somebody who, you know, a group even like let's say the group the ladies that I often travel with, and they come up with an idea and they want to do something. How is it that you go about putting together a brand new itinerary? Because I think it's really interesting. I mean, the way it always seems to start is you and I have a cup of coffee and then we just sort of go, hey, this would be cool. So, but then what happens next after we kind of come up with this would be cool idea? How do you follow that through? How do you make something like that happen?
Right. Well, the main component of that is picking a good DMC. DMC, that's travel lingo for destination management company. There are hundreds and thousands of them out there. They're just organizations, businesses that will organize a tour for an incoming group. So the first thing that has to happen is you have to choose the right DMC. And when I say choose the right one, like I said, there's plenty of choices out there, but you have to, for what I want, I have to find a DMC that will do what I want and not just try to sell me a turnkey experience, right? That a lot of them will have their sort of packaged itineraries, and that's what they're trying to sell you. And then there's sort of another layer of DMCs that have packaged modules, right? So you say, I want to go here, 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 and they're trying to hook together their little modules. But I don't want even that. I want a DMC that is going to craft an experience based on exactly what I'm telling them that I want, right? And
so DMC, just to kind of go back over that, that's just basically like a company that has an office in it. So if we say we want to go to, I don't know, Venezuela, there is a company with an office in Venezuela with agents there they're going to go around. We're not doing a tour to Venezuela, but you know, they can actually, they're on the ground. They can go and make the plans. They can, you know, if we say we want to eat at this kind of restaurant, they have agents that can go out and find the restaurant, but so that we don't have to go and do all of the recon and try to book everything individually ourselves, which is really helpful because I don't speak whatever, you know, Mandarin. I can't plan a trip to China. Right. So I need somebody else to do that for me. And that's kind of where the role of the DMC comes in, right?
Right. And the next level that's just crucial is, of course, they will then provide the local talent for us, because when you and I launch off to go to Thailand or Vietnam or Morocco or whatever, we can't be experts there the way we were in Europe, right? The way you are in Italy and the way I was in the countries that I worked for Rick Steves. We can't be experts all over the world. So we need local experts to do the heavy lifting for us. And the DMCs provide those people for us. And that's another whole part of the process too, of making sure that you get the right sort of person to run those tours for you. So that's a key element as well.
Yeah, well, and something else to know about that, the local guides, is we always have local guides with us. Number one, because it's good to have the local perspective. They are experts in their fields, but also we're not allowed to, in most of these countries,
Right.
to be the tour guide. There's some really strict regulations about who can be talking to a group. I mean, there are rules in place. And I think it's nice because it ends up being sort of a tag team effort where there's me and, A, for example, and, she has her perspective on Thai culture and how all that works. And then I have certain interests because I'm an architect. I like to talk about, what it is you see when you look at temples, and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a cool thing because we end up being able to sort of tag team a little bit, and give our point of view on certain things. And what I always like to do with our local guides in countries is that they know, like Hoda knows the history of Egypt backwards and forwards in a way I could never do. But what I can do is I can say, well, I am an expert in Roman and Italian history, and here's how that connects. And that's kind of the fun part, is how do you make the knowledge of these countries and these places that are outside of a normal frame of reference, how do you make that relevant and connect that to things people already know?
Right. And not only that, you can start to cross-pollinate a little bit. If you have a group of travelers, you've got a group of 24 people, but 18 of them have been to Morocco with you, and then you're in Egypt, you can start to connect what you saw in Morocco to what you're seeing in Egypt, or equating timelines or whatever. You can start to cross-pollinate even within the groups that you're shepherding around.
Yeah, Morocco is such a funny thing. The Morocco tour that we have planned, we have two planned for next year, and they're both like wildly popular. And a bunch of people that went the previous year with me want to sign up to go again, which makes me laugh because I know that they like the shopping and we had such a great time. But one of the things that just sort of strikes me is that, all of these places that I've seen, Morocco is sort of the most exotic for the least amount of putting yourself out there. You know what I mean? I guess I'm thinking about like Egypt, there's some real rough edges to Egypt. Like Egypt's got some real rough edges. Whereas Morocco kind of doesn't in that same way. It's pretty easy on the eyes and easy on the comfort level. It's just an easy destination that makes you feel like you're Indiana Jones,
No, I've been saying since I went to Morocco the first time with the group, it's the perfect first non-European destination and the perfect moderate Islamic country to visit, right? Where they've got a good infrastructure and they're moving in the right direction and they're very moderate. Yeah, I mean, it's got that touch of exoticism because you've started to hedge away from the West. And that used to be for many, many years Turkey, but then Turkey's had its difficulties. They seem to be doing better again now, but they had some troubles with Erdogan and fundamentalism on the rise there, and some various problems, earthquakes, etc. So Morocco has in my mind has become that perfect bridge to a bigger, broader world after Europe.
So then I think that we've kind of covered it, but you would kind of suggest, if somebody has never been to anything other than the United States and Europe, probably the best places to start your explorations that are going outside of your frame of reference would be Morocco and probably Thailand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where my mind was spinning already. And yeah. I thought you were probably going there too, because they are two countries that immediately you feel safe there. You know, we were talking about Egypt, and there's a little bit of a mental adjustment that has to happen just because there's so many armed guards running around, and there's that feeling of almost like at first it feels like a military state or something like that till you figure out it's all there for you. But there's nothing like that in Morocco or Thailand. They are two places in the world where there is a culture of hospitality that's extremely welcoming, right? High standard of living, high standards of cleanliness. Don't have to worry about people getting, ill from the food, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there might be a little bit of Bangkok belly and I don't, whatever the Moroccan equivalent would be, right? A little traveler's diarrhea, but that goes with the territory, right? As far as I'm concerned. But anyway, I could wax on more about that, but those are the two clear choices for if you're ready to splash out beyond Europe. Absolutely.
So is there any place that you have found that is just too much? Like, have you ever gotten a request for a tour that you just started planning and looking at and you went, yeah, no?
Well, people have asked me about Iraq, and Iran. And I would love to go to those places, but I just refer them on to one of our colleagues that does tours there. But that's sort of a self-leveling thing. I don't, people are, I'm generally speaking much more intrepid personally than my clientele are. So no one has really asked, apart from Iraq and Iran that I can think of, has talked about going to a place that I felt a little bit sketchy about.
Ah, okay. So really just Iran would be the one that you would say no thanks to.
Well, I would love to go there, and I would love to take a group there, but I would, again, we talked about being a small tour company. This is one of the downsides. I don't have enough reach to probably get 25 people who are willing to assess those risks rationally and not fearfully in order to actually be able to sell a tour to those countries.
I think right now it's not even possible actually to go to Iran, is it?
Well,
I mean, for Americans.
That's almost a week by week proposition with the COVID-19 and stuff about where you can go and not go. So
yeah, I would bet that's an interesting thing to think about. I would bet that probably in maybe 2 years' time, that Iran might be a reasonable thing to be on the table. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but just politically speaking, I think that when there's a change in administration, that they probably won't have such a antagonistic position towards Iran would be my guess. But who knows,
When it comes to a place feeling safe as a destination, perception is everything.
Yeah, it is.
When we've had our groups in Egypt and Israel, it's funny how Americans, when they cross into the border of Israel, they take a big sigh of relief and they feel safe. But statistically, it's more dangerous than Egypt. Statistically, I mean, and what we're talking about are slivers of tenths of percentages, right? But statistically speaking, yeah, Israel is a little bit more dangerous, right? But the perception is I'm back in a Western, safe feeling place. And that's what counts, is how people feel about it, what the perceptions are.
Yeah, well, and the perception is kind of everything. So, okay, so if you come up with an idea, the DMC arranges things like how, I mean, I guess the local talent really adds a lot to the experience, but how can you kind of, when we're getting people to want to take these tours, how do we sort of get people to open up their minds to things that they hadn't considered before?
Oh, well, for starters, I try to make sure that Imprint's philosophy of travel is clear to everybody up front. I'm hoping that they've gone to the website. Oh, and I have a tour member expectations statement that they have to sign in the registration process. And it talks about some of these things that you and I have been discussing about being a little bit more intrepid and expectations being tempered and being part of a group and willing to make sacrifices to be part of a group, just to set up the right kind of attitude. And then for a specific country, if there are certain things that I think might be trouble spots, I try to make sure to identify that in the pre-trip literature, because like we just finished talking about, expectations, perceptions combined with expectations are everything. So the only answer I can make to that question is I do my best to get out in front of people's expectations, to set expectations, so that when things happen that are maybe could be otherwise alarming, that they're not coming out of left field. And really that's all you can do, other than to continue to reinforce that your first night meeting. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, when people arrive on the first day of a tour, you just hope that you've communicated properly so that their expectations are at the right level. And then you just reinforce that all along the way.
So has there ever been any place that you've taken a group that you would never go back to?
Do you mean like a specific location within a tour or an entire country?
Either.
There's no country that I have visited that I wouldn't love to go back to and take people to again. I did take people on a hike in Bali that I would never do again. In the literature, I have to confess, these were the early days of imprint tours and tour planning. And I just read about this hike in Lonely Planet or Rough Guide or something like that. And I said, this sounds really great. Let's incorporate this into the tour. And I think I described it as an easy 90-minute stroll. Well, it was more like the Bataan Death March. And it started with us going down a very, very steep slope where you literally had to hold on to it wasn't even a handrail. It was like a vine next to the trail. And as we were going down, I thought, you know, if there's a God in heaven, please don't let anybody fall off, because if you fell, you would just knock off the next 3 or 4 people below you, right? It was almost like going down a ladder. So I would never do that again. And I will never do an overnight train in India again, except first class.
The trains are always such a funny thing. I have to say, the train rides that we've done overnight, I don't mind them. And actually, like the one in Vietnam, that was a really nice train, except for that I had the stowaway in my compartment, but that's a completely different story. But I think that the train rides are so funny because people just don't like them. And it's so, I love them. And I don't know, I think that you and I are both firmly in the corner of taking those overnight train rides. It's so efficient and it's atmospheric and all of that. But that is the one place where we definitely differ from our customers.
Right. I mean, the overnight trains are comfortable enough. It's an adventure. It's a part of the local culture. It's the way the locals get long distance, right, in an efficient way. And honestly, when you're talking about trying to, in Thailand or Vietnam with a 12-day or a 14-day itinerary, to pack in as much of a varied experience as possible, having a night like that where you go to sleep in one place and wake up somewhere else, that you don't have to jump on a bus and travel at 6 hours, or take even a 45-minute flight that requires you to leave the hotel 2.5 hours before in order to go through security, to check the bags, to get on the plane, and then all the falderall at the other end. You know, it's a 45-minute flight is a half of a day lost on a tour. So 3/4 of a day on a bus, half a day on an airplane, instead of going to sleep in one place and waking up and having breakfast in a completely new place. That the efficiency drives me a little bit, but also, I mean, again, that's a genuine local cultural connection experience. And I'm kind of glad we're talking about this, because that is one of those things that sort of, another one that sort of separates the sheep from the goats. If there's people out there watching that are going, oh, I don't want to sleep on a train, okay, that's fine. There are plenty of tour companies that won't ask you to do that. But we want those people to go, okay, I'm a little uncomfortable with this, but I'm going to push the envelope. I'm going to have an open mind. I'm going to adjust my expectations. Let's see how it goes.
And just to say, we don't actually have people sleep on trains on every itinerary. There are.
That's true.
Are we still doing it in Vietnam?
Yes.
Okay, still in Vietnam. Thailand, we decided not to do it, but that Thailand experience on the train was really unfortunate because we were supposed to be in first class. We had booked
Right,
first class. They
right,
bumped us for whatever reason. And
right.
then second class ended up being problematic.
Well, yeah, yeah. Those things happen on a tour. We do an overnight or two in China, but those trains are amazing. Nobody complains about those experiences. And India as well. I would do an overnight train. No, I don't think we have it included, but I would. Oh, I am doing an extension off of my southern India tour to visit the tiger sanctuary that has the highest levels of success rate for people to see tigers. No, I think we're flying. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling on here. I would do an overnight train in India again, but it would have to be first class. So.
Gotcha. Robin wants to know, so wait, are we goats or sheep? Which are the better ones?
I will. Is that one of my Robins?
Robin Doherty, both of our Robin.
Oh, Robin Doherty. Okay. I'm going to let you choose, Robin.
I'm reminded of a very famous song where the chorus is "Sheep go to heaven, goats go to hell." So.
Oh, well, then I guess we better be sheep.
So, okay. So you would say that you wouldn't do that hike in Indonesia, but has there ever been a country or a city that you would never go back to?
Well, I'm not in love with Delhi in India. It's so polluted. It's, I don't know, 15 million people or whatnot. The air is orange. But you pretty much have to begin and end there because that's where the big Indira Gandhi International Airport is, where almost all the international flights come in and out, at least for northern India. And then there's some amazing sights. But what I do in those situations, a city that I don't care for, that I wouldn't otherwise include on an itinerary, I just do one night there and move along. I feel the same way about Lima, Peru. Lima, Peru is a lot nicer than New Delhi, but compared to the rest of Peru, I find it a little underwhelming. So but it's kind of where you have to begin. So I just limit to one night there and move along. And that way, by starting in a city like that I'm not just crazy about and doing one night, if there's anybody who has read about the Red Fort in New Delhi or the Jami Mosque that want to see those things that we're not going to include, they can arrive a day early, as almost everybody does, and they can see those things on their own.
So what are your predictions now that this coronavirus thing looks like there's a light at the end of the tunnel? What are your predictions about how the tourism industry is going to change?
Well, that's a tough one. And I've mostly avoided trying to think about what might be until I know exactly what it is we have to work with. But I think that, smaller groups might be a part of the future. Of course, that, smaller groups means higher prices. And that philosophically, I have a tough time with the idea of small groups, but because I like the camaraderie that develops in a group of 18 to 20 to 22 people, that seems to just be that perfect number. But at Imprint, we might be looking at, 20 instead of 26, so that people can spread out on a bus. I'm hopeful, honestly, that the vaccines that are coming down the pike are going to be successful enough to return us to a relative place of normalcy again. I mean, I think that things will never be completely the same. We might have to do things like, instead of gathering around one table for a meal, getting takeout and spreading out in a big room in the hotel and doing meals like that. So, but again, I just need to wait and see how things unfold to really get a sense for that.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to predict. I think that the other thing that's going to be important as tour operators is looking at what are the new requirements, because like bus companies, for one thing, I know that I'm hearing in Italy, they aren't going to let more than 10 people on a bus, on a big coach. Museums are going to have regulations like that where groups need to be of a certain size. So yeah, there is going to need to be flexibility going forward for anybody who's traveling with a group, because a lot of things that have been possible for years probably aren't going to be possible in the future, or they'll just be different.
By the way, that's another reason for your followers to start to think about maybe some non-European destinations, because Europe has, as we've often talked in private and in public, Europe has exploded in popularity in the last decade and in the last 2 decades, to the point where the major sites in Europe are overwhelmed by numbers. And if you can't get a reservation to get into the Vatican museums or the Louvre in Paris or whatever, which was already happening, and now if they're going to try to control numbers and stuff like that, that's going to create some real clog ups. But in the semi-developing world, some of these places that we've been talking about, those, because it's a little more exotic, because mainstream tourism, mainstream middle-class tourism has not exploded in these places, you're not dealing with the same kind of numbers. Don't get me wrong. There are crowds, but it's a different level.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd like to say that I didn't have any crowds in Egypt, and there weren't, but that was for different reasons. We're the only tour bus at Abu Simbel, but that was not normal.
And when I was there in 2016 and Egyptian tourism hadn't really bounced back from the Arab Spring yet, yeah, I had a group at sunrise at Abu Simbel entirely alone. I'm not exaggerating even a little bit. It was my group and the guards at sunrise. Just one of the top travel experiences of my entire life.
Well, and I think that is something that you and I are both really looking forward to once travel starts up again, whether that's, by May of next year or whether that's longer from then, is that it's probably going to it'll take time to kind of get back to where it was, which is going to be kind of neat. The people who are going to be traveling are going to get those experiences of smaller crowds at things that are typically overwhelmed,
Right. Yeah, it looks to me, I mean, the distribution of the vaccines has to happen. We have to see how that works out and stuff. But it looks to me like certainly by fall of 2021, we should be able to be traveling again. So those people who are intrepid enough to jump on board right on that first wave, yeah, it's going to be a nice experience out there when the numbers are down.
Yeah, I think so too. So what is your prediction for what the next Morocco is? What is the next hot destination that maybe you're not doing already?
Ooh, that I'm not doing all right. Well, I mean, Peru is pretty hot, but we're already doing that. I expect Japan will be an easy sell, because Japan feels more Western, I think, as an Asian country. I think people would be more inclined to go to Japan than maybe even China or Southeast Asia. But my list of destinations that we've not been to that I still want to go is getting pretty small. I do want to do Ecuador and the Galapagos, but that's no secret, right? That's no hidden gem. I'd like to do a Himalaya tour someday, sort of a Nepal, Bhutan, Tibet. I don't know if it even makes sense. The little bit I've looked at it looks like it might be logistically difficult. And by the way, back to this idea of how we set up a tour when we decide we want to go somewhere, you have to balance what you want to see and what you want to do with what you can make happen comfortably, right? Can you get from point A to point B in a day in a way that's not overly fatiguing for your group? Or so when I look at those 3 Himalayan countries, it doesn't look like there's budget flights flying between them, and there's zero overland travel between them, right? Because you're talking about going over the tallest mountains in the world. So logistics are a big part of it too.
Well, and I think that also is something that I feel like we need to like hand out like special badges to the people that have gone through sort of fiery tours, like, because sometimes when we're doing an itinerary for the first time, there are going to be bumps in the road, and that's okay, because sometimes that adds a lot of fun to it. But we also want to make sure that the team, you know, the people who are taking that tour are flexible. And I don't know, I feel like we need to hand out awards for the most flexible travelers, and then only let those people go on our first pass of a tour.
Well, I'm lucky in that I have a group of travelers that I started with way back more than 10 years ago, that they kind of think of themselves as the trailblazer group. Whenever we decide on a new destination, they will fill the first tour, and they know, they have that expectation that they are the trailblazers. And actually, it's funny that you should bring that up, because as you know, we give out a little bit of swag when people go on their first tour with us. They get a journal and a t-shirt. And the journal, then we have stamps for each country. Like if you're traveling in Thailand, it looks like a visa stamp for Thailand. You stamp it in your journal to show that you've been to Thailand with imprint. I do have a Trailblazers stamp for the journal.
Oh, I didn't know that. I
Yeah,
have a couple of those stamps in my workshop actually, but I didn't know you had a Trailblazer stamp. That's
I
cool.
do. Yeah.
You need to have like a t-shirt or something that you give out for the people who are like yeah, the explorers. It could be an explorer t-shirt, because you
Right.
never know what's going to happen.
That's right. Those first time out, you can do all the great planning in the world, and I've gotten pretty good at asking the right questions and being able to think through a tour pretty carefully. But there's always some bumps in the road the first time through, and you figure out this could have been better this way, or this would have been better arranged that. So.
Yeah.
But
Well,
but like we keep saying, that's part of the adventure. And you know, I'm lucky in that I have a regular bunch that loves going out there, and they know whatever happens, I'm gonna find a solution, right? That if something goes wrong, there's gonna be a solution.
yeah, and I have to say that that's part of what has really attracted me to focus most of my time and energy on doing these more exotic trips, is that, you know, I love guiding in Italy and I love everything I do, but after 20 years of doing that, it's sort of like you know how the days are going to go, and no matter how much you try to change it up and you add in maybe a new lunch stop or you try to change things a little bit, what a part of the delight of independent travel is that sort of serendipity of not knowing where the day is going to take you and things, you know, changing. And I've tried to add that into my European tours, but it's hard. Whereas when you go to a more exotic country, it's just built into the day that something is going to have to be different than what you had planned, you know. And I don't see that as a bad thing, just because I feel like, you know, group travel can be pretty, I don't know, unimaginative and uninspired, you know, and I've always fought against that as a guide. I've fought against that feeling of it being predictable and 1,000 people have done this before. And I want every group to feel like they're the first people ever doing this thing, you know.
Right.
And so that's getting harder and harder in Europe. But gosh, the trip I did to Israel and Egypt, that definitely was a trip that has only happened once.
Thank you, COVID-19. Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's really important that people get that sense that what they're doing is something unique, you know, and I think it's really getting harder in Europe to give people experiences that don't feel canned or massively repeated, you know, and I think that's why for me, I'm going more towards, if I work in Europe, I'm going to be doing almost like one-off tours. I'm going to be doing stuff that's creative, and like we're doing tours that don't have, I'm selling tours that have no itinerary, because I don't want to put an itinerary down, because I want to figure out how do we make things exciting and interesting and give people the delight of discovery that maybe they couldn't possibly find on something more mainstream. So yeah, so that I think is part of the real fun of doing these things in more challenging countries, right?
Absolutely. And you know, that's a big part of that choosing the right DMC thing, right? Is finding, you know, you've touched on some of the things I was referring to, that I have to find an outfit that can deliver my vision, those sort of things that you were talking about, right? Those genuine connections and whatnot. Like I know that you met Chetan, who's our guide in India. We spontaneously all ended up, not spontaneously, we let them know, but I spoke to him about creating a really genuine cultural connection experience early on in the tour, and he got on the phone with his family, and we took our whole group to his family home in Jodhpur for tea one afternoon. And when you do India in a couple of years, your group will have dinner with his family, right? You can't, that when you're talking about a group of 20 people, you can't get more genuine than that, right? It can't be spontaneous with 20 people like it can when you're traveling by yourself. But whenever we can manage that sort of experience, we try to work that in so that it doesn't feel canned.
Yeah, and actually, now that I'm thinking about it, just in the past couple of years, like in Vietnam, I needed to add an extra meal, and so I asked Bon to like put something in Hue. So we ended up going to just a family home, and we literally had dinner in a family home because they just
Awesome.
called somebody he knew had a living room big enough to fit however many people I had with me, and it was just literally the family dinner, which was something really extraordinary. And also then, I mean, in Israel, I was telling Madi that I wanted to take the group in Ramallah to actually go to a coffee house and smoke hookahs, you know, because I thought this is something that they would never do on their own, especially in Palestine. And we did it. And it was kind of crazy and cool and something super local. Or the other one that I was thinking about, what was the other one? There's just so many examples of these sort of fun things. Oh, it was in Morocco. I wanted to do henna. And so we had been talking since the beginning of it. I'd had people ask me, and then I was like, how can I set this up? And working with our local guide, we ended up going to a family house where the daughters were really into henna tattoos. And so they weren't professionals. They didn't have a business. They invited us into their house. They showed us how to make mint tea, and then they got out the henna stuff, and anybody that wanted to do it got to do it. And that's the kind of stuff that you can't do individually on your own. And that's kind of I think the zone for group travel is when you can source and find experiences like that would be totally intimidating or completely impossible if you were an independent traveler, you know?
Right. That same guide, my first time through in Morocco, we were scheduled to have tea with a family when we were at the Dades Gorge, but we couldn't do it for some logistical reason. And Tariq phoned his mother, and we ended up in Marrakesh going and having tea at his family. Much more genuine, much more authentic. I feel compelled here to say, but it doesn't always go beautifully. When you and I are riffing and creating things on the fly that end up being, for the most part, really amazing, great connection experiences, there's no guarantee that it will always work. And sometimes there will be stumbles. And that's where, if you've got a bunch of people who expect every T to be crossed and every I to be dotted on their travel experience and nothing to go awry, you lose that freedom to try new things, right? It requires that you have the right kind of, I keep using the word intrepid, but it's the word, right? Intrepid travelers. That's, you know, as long as you and I keep getting intrepid travelers on our tours, we're going to be able to keep trying these new things. But if we arrive at a point where people have a specific expectation and it has to be an American style level of comfort and efficiency and yada, 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 that will start to break up. So we want to hold on to that as long as we can.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's always so inspiring when we have our conversations, Reid, and we always come up with new and interesting and crazy ideas. Most of them are advisable, some inadvisable on occasion.
Well, usually the inadvisable ones fritter away before we try to execute them. So usually.
Yeah. Yeah, usually. So, well, there you go, you guys. That's what Reid and I have been up to. We have been trying to figure out what we're going to be doing over the next couple of years. And there's some super, super exciting things. So, yeah. So you're most excited about China, right? And Japan.
Well, China off the beaten track, and Japan, because those will be new. Those will be new destinations for us. Oh, gosh, I've completely glossed over Patagonia, which was actually scheduled for spring of 2021, but we ended up canceling it because of COVID-19. Patagonia is on the itinerary, and Antarctica for late winter of 2022 as well. Those will be new destinations that I'm pretty excited about as well.
Yeah, and I've taken Patagonia off the schedule for now because I want Reid to do it first.
let me take the trailblazers out there and work out the kinks.
Yeah, exactly. So I've decided I'm gonna push Patagonia back to maybe 2023 and just see how it goes for you first.
Fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. So, well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for Coffee Chat this morning. And thank you, Reid, for all of the wonderful things you do for travelers, but especially all of the joy and excitement you have brought to my life, because my goodness, this is a life that I would have never predicted, like a pivot in my career I'd have never, ever guessed. And it is so good. Like it's so much fun to open people up to parts of the world that they never would have ever done. I can think of so many people that have traveled with me that at the end of the trip, they just say, they say, I'd have never done this without you. And it's the same. I'd have never done any of this without you, Reid. So thank you so much.
That's what it's all about, right? Opening up people's eyes to new horizons. And I'll end with Marcel Proust, who said, travel is not about seeing new landscapes. It's about learning to see with new eyes. That's what we're all about. So you're welcome. And let's keep showing people the world.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. This week, I think we're going to be doing a lot of cooking. So if you're interested in preparing for Thanksgiving, I'm going to be doing lots of cucina quarantina in anticipation of Thanksgiving. So we'll see you basically every day this week, except for Thanksgiving, back here on Adventures with Sarah. Thanks again so much, Reid, for joining me.
You're welcome. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Keep